Hello and welcome to KRWG Public Media 2024 election coverage featuring New Mexico House District 38. KRWG Public Media and the League of Women Voters are pleased to present this forum. The rules for this forum are the candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question and should not mention their opponents in their answer. My co-moderator for this forum is Elisa Sanchez with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico. And we welcome our candidates, Democratic incumbent candidate Tara Jaramillo and Republican candidate Rebecca Dow. Let's get started with the first question for the incumbent candidate. Why are you running?
Well, thank you for having me here. I decided to run several years ago during the pandemic. I'm a healthcare worker and I was providing services at Alamo Navajo Indian Reservation. And during that time I saw the huge discrepancies in rural New Mexico, whether that be access to broadband, internet. We were having trouble just accessing healthcare services and education. So I knew there had to be a different way. And however sad the pandemic was for our small community, we lost 70 people in our community, and 6 of those were my colleagues, my employees. And so that spurred me to say there has got to be more for rural New Mexico, and that is why I ran.
Okay, candidate Dow, same question.
Yeah, thank you so much. As the former candidate from House District 38, I had the opportunity of working in the legislative session in 2017 and 18 and forward. And there was a lot of balance and a lot of collaboration between Republicans, moderate Democrats, and really across the board in both chambers. And you know, that has shifted over the last couple of years. There is now a super majority of what would be considered radical left in Santa Fe, and the voice of Southern New Mexico has been drowned out. The radicals in Santa Fe are voting on things like mandating electric vehicles and tampons in boys' bathrooms. But what parents really want is to have opportunity for their children. Citizens want more money in their pockets. You know, they want to have more money to take home at the end of the day. And they want less regulation and less overreach when it comes to health care, when it comes to their teachers being able to teach, and small businesses. So I am running so that Southern New Mexico will have a balanced voice, and that voice will be loud and it will be clear. And I think it's a really pivotal election that we have right now, whether we'll continue with the super radical majority or whether we'll pivot to common sense governance.
That is our time. We're going to move on to the next question.
Candidate Dow, if elected, what are your highest priorities?
You know, I am a retired early childhood educator, and I have spent my life in Truth or Consequences, where I grew up, the heart of District 38, creating faith-based nonprofits so that families can thrive. And you know, so I went to Santa Fe originally, you know, and it is still my intent to create an environment where there is practical, reasonable policies that can do good for all New Mexicans. However, you know, as of recent, there have been, you know, even elected officials have said that the Constitution can be suspended and that their oath of office can be suspended. And so a very, very important something that we could have assumed is that I would take my oath of office to uphold the United States Constitution and the New Mexico Constitution very seriously. And as has been mentioned, you know, during the pandemic, we were able to see that people were willing to take away the First Amendment right, the right to assemble, the right to go to church, the right to speak freely about your concerns about what was happening. So it's a pretty simple thing to say that the oath of office is of utmost importance for me.
Representative, what are your highest priorities?
Children. I have spent my career working with children, and children in poverty, children in crisis. And as the daughter of educators, I was educated at the Alamo Navajo Indian Reservation and also in Socorro. I was born and raised there. And children must be our priority, whether that is home visiting, early childhood education, and then of course moving forward so that families can thrive in housing, drug rehabilitation, behavioral health support. And so that has been my priority while in the House, and that will continue to be my priority moving forward.
All right, we're moving on to our next question. We're going to stay with the incumbent candidate. What can state lawmakers do to address violent crime and property crime in New Mexico?
We can do a lot. And when we look at the bills that have been passed in Santa Fe, we looked at retail crime, and that was a huge bill that we passed. We also need to work on behavioral health and drug addiction. Desmond Tutu had said that it's not enough just to pull the bodies out of the water. We need to go upstream and identify why they're up there. And that's really what lawmakers can work on. How do we support families in thriving? How do we support drug addiction? How do we support individuals in crisis with mental health? But we also need to hold our courts accountable. We need to stop that revolving door, and we need to ensure that our communities are safe.
Candidate Dow, same question.
Well, I think the very most important thing that is urgent and immediate right now is to close the border. New Mexico has an open border, and we see that the criminal cartel is coming across. There's human trafficking, there's sex trafficking, and I'm not just talking about the migrants who are being abused. I'm talking about New Mexico citizens who are dealing with 2 fentanyl deaths a day. We need to secure the border, and I absolutely supported Michelle Lujan Grisham's effort to have a special session and to address crime. There's things that could have been addressed there, including $10 million that was proposed to be sent to the border to help our law enforcement who are begging for the technology and the resources they need to secure the border. Prevention always. Prevention always. Parents are the #1 indicator of student success. Parents are the #1 indicator of life success for those children. And parents who are engaged are likely to have children who are also successful. And so we've got to strengthen families. But parents want to know that their children are safe at school. They want to be safe in their neighborhoods. Their businesses should be protected. And that means listening to people like Chief Story and the different officers across our district who are asking for specific responses.
That's our time.
Candidate Dow, what do you feel the state legislature can do to improve mental health services?
Again, it begins with healthy families. The behavioral health crisis in New Mexico is crazy. It's absolutely out of control, and a lot of that has to do with substance use and comorbidity. Raising healthy children is right. I envision New Mexico where families can access the health care they need so that their children are born healthy, that they are able to provide a safe home for their children. They can afford groceries. I mean, a lot of the things that families are facing are compounded by the circumstances that are beyond their control, the regulations that drive up the cost of goods sold and drive up the cost of energy, so that there's more peace in the home because we've gotten out of the way, where they can pursue the American dream and own a home. And that means not over-regulating what it costs to build a home. But then for those who are dealing with behavioral health issues, we need to have access to interventions. I support and even started home visiting programs and parent-child psychotherapy and things to support healthy children, because it's easier to grow a healthy child than to mend a broken man. But those programs remain voluntary, even for the families who need it most. Those need to become mandatory when a child's at risk.
Same question to you. What can the legislature do to improve mental health services?
Well, it goes back to building them. We know in New Mexico we have a depleted mental health service that has been deplorable over the last 10 years. We need to build those systems in place. I work for a children family advocacy group, and I know that when somebody comes in, when a parent comes in and says, I'm ready for treatment, we struggle to find that treatment facility for them. And we need to be able to be proactive, to send individuals to these treatment centers, to behavioral health centers, and to build them. And that starts with education. We need to work with our educational institutions to ensure that we're growing our own practitioners in New Mexico, that we're utilizing behavioral health through telehealth while we grow this. And it's going to take a huge effort, but it's also going to take the investment in our communities to be able to do that.
Okay, our next question for the incumbent candidate, if elected, how do you plan on addressing substance abuse in New Mexico?
What a scourge this is. And again, I work with families in crisis. And the majority of our families are addicted to various drugs, primarily fentanyl. I've worked with families whose children have been exposed and also whose children have died from fentanyl overdoses. And when we look at, again, what are we going to do for New Mexicans? Primarily, we need to provide those quick treatment centers so that they can enter into those. Also, children who are born addicted, it is not mandatory that their parents enter into a treatment center. We need to change the KRWG law so that they are mandatorily required to enter treatment centers. I've never worked with a mom who said, this is exactly where I wanted to be right at this moment when she's addicted and having a difficult time and struggling. We need to support them in moving forward.
That is our time. Candidate Dow.
First, we start with securing the border. Fentanyl, we have 2 deaths from fentanyl in New Mexico every single day. That's because of a wide open border. Second, we need to listen to our law enforcement officers. They're asking us for help, and they are proposing local ordinances and legislation. Support it. The Sheriff's Association, the Police Association, and the Border Sheriff's Association all have proposals. We don't have to be experts on everything. We have to listen to the people who are dealing with it every day. As far as children are concerned, I absolutely agree that it's not, I don't know that we should mandate that everyone go to treatment. It sounds like a whole lot of treatment and putting a whole lot of people in facilities. But I do think that it's not one size fits all, but every family needs a plan, and the reunification should certainly only happen after those parents are no longer actively using and that child's safe and secure in that home to be reunited. So I definitely think that the voluntary programs like home visiting, like parent-child psychotherapy, like infant mental health, all the programs that we've built, early intervention, they need to be mandatory for children who are most at risk. Children need to be taught critical thinking and problem-solving skills so they can refuse risky behavior.
That's our time. We're going to move on to the next question.
Candidate Dow, what's your plan to address affordable housing in New Mexico?
Thank you for that question. It's becoming more and more important every day. We cannot be in a state where thousands of new folks are coming to our state and we are obliged to provide them with free housing. That's driving up the cost. A few years ago, there was a mandate that you must have the capacity for solar on your home on all new builds. That drives up the cost. Now we have a brand new mandate that you must have all new construction must have electrical vehicle capacity on it. When a home is taken over by a new resident, it goes off the new tax value. All these things drive up cost, and we have more demand than we have housing. So we've got to have affordable housing, and we need to roll back some of the unnecessary regulations, not things that are about health and safety, but the things that are driving up the cost. The permitting process is burdensome. There needs to be a reasonable response in time. The demand is there. And so we would have affordable housing if government gets out of the way. When you talk to contractors, when you talk to people with mortgage finance authority that are trying to help people get into homes, they talk about the cost of taxes on property.
All right. That is our time.
Representative, what is your plan for affordable housing in New Mexico?
Well, you know, we have just built a 35-home facility in Socorro, and it is full, and there's a waiting list for that. We need to partner with our school districts, our universities to solve this issue so that we can bring people into New Mexico. And everybody's struggling with this. So what do we need to do? We need to reinvest into the housing market. We need to subsidize housing for our most vulnerable. We have 100 homeless people in Socorro. We need to subsidize that and help them get into homes, help them get into jobs, help them get back into the workforce so that we can build healthy families.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next question for candidate Jaramillo. What reforms would you support to improve New Mexico's educational ranking?
You know, I've worked in education for, 25 years and as the daughter of educators. And we need more local control. We are now on our 5th Secretary of PED. There is not consistency in policy or direction. So barring that, I don't know that that's going to change, but we certainly need more local control so that school districts can move forward with what their plan is. I also support a state school board that will overlook PED.
Okay, candidate Dow, same question.
Well, obviously, I support local control. We elect local school board members so that you see them in the restaurant, you see them at church, you see them at the softball game, and you can hold them accountable. They're there for a reason. At the same time, we need to pair that with transparency and accountability. I successfully passed with bipartisan support, what you may know as the Public Education Department dashboard, and that's to follow those dollars that are generated by the district to see if they're going to the student that generated them. Because when dollars hit the district, they're unrestricted, and it's not money, obviously, because we've put more and more money in the public education system, and our ranking is worse than ever. So it's the things happening outside the school day as well as transparency, accountability, and making sure that those dollars follow the students who need it the most. What we don't need is more top-down rulemaking from PED where they are, it's like whiplash for these teachers. Let teachers teach, let our educators innovate, and I also believe that we should have, if a child's in a failing school district, the parent's the primary educator, and they should be able to choose a school or educational setting that benefits their child.
That is our time. We'll move on to the next question.
Okay, candidate Dow, if elected, what steps will you take to address health care challenges in New Mexico?
We need to reform the Medical Malpractice Act. The Medical Malpractice Act has created the highest liability with the lowest burden of proof in the nation. And so we are losing our healthcare providers. I think we are down to, most private practices have had to join a hospital or a larger network where there's still a cap in place. So the number one thing that we have to do is to reform the Medical Malpractice Act. We're losing doctors. They have to go to a hospital. And now the hospitals are saying they're down to one insurance provider for the state. We are at critical mass when it comes to healthcare. We need more telehealth. We need more mobile units, and we need more free market. The less options we have, the higher the price will go. The more competition we have, the lower the prices will go. And so, but number one, medical malpractice reform.
Representative?
We worked hard in the legislature to increase Medicaid reimbursements so that those are 100 and 150% of Medicare. And when we talk to our practitioners in rural areas, that really is the problem. We are not reimbursed at the same rates as, say, corporate hospitals. And so that is highly affecting our ability to pay the bills as medical practitioners. So that is one area that we need to look at. We also need to look at medical malpractice. And how can we help physicians with the burden of that cost that is really putting people out of business or having physicians leave our communities. We also need to reinvest in education so that we grow our own practitioners and encourage them to move to rural areas to provide these services.
All right, we're moving on to our next question, and we're going to stay with the incumbent candidate. How can the legislature address water issues in an increasingly arid state?
You know, when we look up and down this valley, you know, we are from Socorro to Doña Ana, and the various needs, whether that's tourism, whether that's farming, ranching, or water for our communities. And really what we need is a solid plan, the 50-year plan. We have New Mexico Tech that's out there that is working on this plan. And how do we conserve water while actually ensuring that water continues with us? And New Mexico Tech has worked with us and has dedicated their time to doing that. And to measuring water, we also need to look at the pact between Texas and New Mexico and solve that issue. I would like Elephant Butte to have a minimum standard to fill that butte. And you know, it's working together with different entities is going to solve this.
Candidate Dow.
Well, New Mexico, you know, water is life. And, you know, we have the scarcity being in an arid desert state, but yet the world is 75% water. I mean, the majority of the earth is water. And so we can use conservation practices to make sure that we're maximizing the water and even improving our watershed. So that could be, we need to thin. Responsible thinning. We need to do to improve our watersheds. We need to get rid of noxious weeds. There are water plans and there are land management plans that are, if adequately funded, would allow us to see huge improvements in our aquifer. So that would include you know, land management, low till, providing agriculture producers with drip systems to improve our processes and how we water. There's lots of examples around the world where desalinization is working. I am proud of New Mexico Tech and even NMSU who have projects around desalinization and the reuse of produced water. There's lots of really already current ways that we can use produced water and desalinized water in commercial use.
All right, that's our time.
Candidate Dow, taxpayers invested nearly $220 million building Spaceport America and millions more supporting the operations there. Do you feel taxpayers are getting a return on their investment with the spaceport?
Well, it's an interesting question because space is the final frontier. The aerospace and space industry is the fastest growing industry in the world. Are we seeing the rate of return at the New Mexico spaceport that we should? No. Would that be the responsibility of bad governance? Yeah. Should they be listening to more people with like the Space Fund and enterprise funds that are experts in this and taking their advice? Absolutely. So is it a waste? I don't think the rate of return has been there, but we do have a beautiful resource in our state that should be coveted around the world with the location, with the no-fly zone. There are non-disclosure agreements there, and there is a lot of work going on, and I think that the struggles that Virgin has sort of monopolizes the market and the time, but there is a lot of important work going on at Spaceport. It could be so much better, and it's underutilized, but it is not wasted, and it could be improved upon.
Representative?
Absolutely, transparency is needed. Aerospace will be $1 trillion infusion of money, and we need to be a part of that. But are we? So right now, it's transparency. What is happening at the spaceport? We're not quite sure. What are the revenues? What is the return on our investments? That's not readily available to us, and I believe that it is an opportunity that we shouldn't miss, but we also need transparency in moving forward.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next question. We'll stay with candidate Jaramillo. In what ways should the state legislature be addressing its child welfare system to create better outcomes for foster children in New Mexico?
You know, this has been a huge debate and one that I fully jumped on board. We need an Office of Children's Advocacy, or an OMBUDS, and that's an oversight of CYFD. Why is that important? Because we have so many issues. We are bogged down by confidentiality, in which the only time that we understand what's happening with families is when it hits the news. We need oversight. And that oversight starts with the Office of Children's Advocacy. And on top of that, then we need to support these families through the reunification process or through adoption. And that's going to take a concerted effort, and it's going to be a heavy lift, but we all need to dig down and do this. And that's really what our LFC meeting was, talking to Secretary Casadas, that it is time to move this forward.
Candidate Dow.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. In what ways should the state legislature be addressing its child welfare system to create better outcomes for foster children in New Mexico?
Well, very few children that have substantiated neglect and abuse or that have had multiple safe calls end up in foster care. So I think it's a bigger picture than that. The entire role of CYFD, how the Children's Code plays in with that. But I have worked with at-risk children my entire life and have seen the failures of CYFD. It's one of the things that drove me to run for office in the first place, and to learn how broken CYFD is and how absolutely unwilling the administration has been to create reforms. Not just this administration, any administration. And so I do believe that there needs an ombudsman, and ombudsman does not have statutory authority to correct and regulate right now, so we need to do reforms. It could be through the Substitute Care Advisory Committee, it could be reforms to the Children's Code, but there has got to be teeth, and CYFD can't hold themselves accountable. They can't, the buck can't stop within the agency. There has to be a third party outside accountability and the ombudsman, so that these third parties that are shining the light are not overwhelmed.
That is our time. We are now going to move on to our final question.
Candidate Dow, what changes, if any, need to be made in the tax structure of New Mexico?
New Mexico has more resources. People are hardworking. They're ambitious. We have so much surplus. I mean, you can see our surplus comes from our natural resources. We should be the richest state in the union, but our people are the poorest. And that is because of our tax code. That is because of our business environment. We have got to, I would abolish the gross receipts tax and replace it with a common sense flat tax or some sort of a smaller gross receipts tax like you see in other states. We're the only state with a gross receipts tax, and that needs to change. We should eliminate the tax on Social Security. We should eliminate the tax on retirement income. Anything that's a double taxation should be eliminated. We need to make a business-friendly state. We would be on par with Texas, we'd be on par with Arizona if our tax code is reformed. And there's experts on that, and they've brought forth diverse and very meaningful reforms that would be better than what we have now. So anything would be better than what we have now.
Candidate Jaramillo.
Yes. So we were fortunate enough this year to actually pass legislation that is going to decrease taxes on Social Security. It is not taxing veterans. The family income credit we brought forward, and I believe we need to increase that. The child earned income credit we brought forward, and I believe that needs to be increased. The bottom line is we're going to need to put more money into the pockets of our families, and that starts with taxes. And so those are the reforms that we have done, and those are the reforms that I believe we need to increase to support our families.
Okay, that concludes our New Mexico House District 38 Candidate Forum. We want to thank our candidates, incumbent Democratic candidate Tara Jaramillo and Republican candidate Rebecca Dow. We also want to thank our co-moderator, Elisa Sanchez, with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico. A reminder, you can stay updated with local election coverage by visiting the KRWG News Election Center at our website, krwg.org. I'm Anthony Moreno. Thank you for joining us. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th.